Commander Kelva stood before the holographic display in his command chamber, his forearms folded behind his back in the traditional posture of contemplation. The blue light from the projection cast shadows across his scaled features as he studied the data streaming before him. 47 species had fallen before the might of the Arvelian Dominion. 47 different worlds, each with their own warriors, their own weapons, their own desperate strategies. All of them had failed. Now there would be a 48th. The planet rotated slowly in the hologram, a blue and green sphere that the inhabitants called Earth. Kelvas had spent 3 cycles reviewing everything the Dominion's scout ships had gathered about this species. They called themselves humans, and from what he could see, they were remarkably unremarkable. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin with no natural armor or weapons. Their technology lagged behind the Dominion by at least 2 centuries. Their fastest ships barely qualified as interplanetary craft, crude things that burned chemical fuel like something from the ancient texts. What caught Kelvis's attention was not their technology, but their history. The intercepted broadcasts painted a picture of a species that had spent its entire existence fighting itself. Wars over territory, over resources, over ideas that seemed meaningless to an outsider. They had divided themselves into groups called nations, and had only recently begun to unite under a single governing body. Even now, old tensions simmered beneath the surface of their fragile peace. Sub-Commander Threx entered the chamber, his footsteps barely audible on the metal floor. He was younger than Kelvis, with only 70 years of service compared to Kelvis's 200, but he had earned his position through careful analysis and tactical precision. The fleet reports readiness. "Commander," Threx said, his voice carrying the measured tone of proper military protocol. "All vessels have completed their final checks. We await your order to enter the system." Kelvis gestured at the hologram with one of his lower arms. "Tell me what you see, Threx. What do the humans tell us about themselves?" Threx studied the display for a moment before responding. "They are divided, aggressive. They possess nuclear weapons but have used them only twice in their history, both times on each other. Their military tactics are documented extensively in their entertainment media. They favor direct confrontation and seem to value individual sacrifice over collective efficiency." "Correct," Kelva said. "They are predictable. Every species fights according to its nature, and humanity's nature is written clearly in their past. They will resist initially, driven by pride and territorial instinct. When they realize they cannot win, they will fracture along their old national lines. Some will seek terms. Others will fight to the bitter end. We have seen this pattern before." Threx hesitated, which was unusual for him. "Commander, there is one element in the reports that concerns me. The humans have no experience with interstellar warfare, yet they have prepared defensive positions throughout their system. They seem to expect us." Kelvis allowed himself a small gesture of amusement, a tilt of his head that among his people indicated mild entertainment. "Of course they expect someone, Threx. They have been broadcasting their presence to the galaxy for over a century with their radio signals. They have sent primitive probes beyond their system. They know they are not alone. What concerns me is not their preparation but their imagination. They have filled their media with stories of alien invasions, and in every story they win through some clever trick or hidden advantage. This has made them overconfident." The hologram shifted to show the human fleet positions. Kelvis counted perhaps 200 vessels of varying sizes, most concentrated around their homeworld and their colony on the 4th planet. Against his 300 warships, each more advanced and better armed, the outcome seemed inevitable. "The High Command expects this operation to conclude within 10 planetary rotations," Kelvis continued. "I believe we can accomplish it in 5. The humans will see our fleet, recognize their inferiority, and accept annexation terms. Some violence is inevitable, but it will be brief." Threx nodded but did not look entirely convinced. "And if they do not surrender? Then we will demonstrate our superiority through measured force. We destroy a few military installations, perhaps one of their orbital stations. They will understand. Every species understands strength, Threx. It is the one universal language." Kelvas dismissed the hologram with a gesture and turned to face his second-in-command directly. "You have doubts. Speak them freely. That is your role." Threx considered his words carefully. "Commander, I have reviewed the human conflicts in detail. They possess a quality that is difficult to quantify. In situations where they should surrender, they often continue fighting. In their largest war, entire cities were destroyed. Yet they did not cease hostilities. They seemed to possess an irrational resistance to accepting defeat. Irrational is the correct word, Kelvus replied. But irrationality cannot overcome a 2-century technology gap. Their stubbornness will cost them lives, but it will not change the outcome. We have fought species that were stronger than humans. We have fought species that were more technologically advanced than they are now. We have always prevailed because we fight with logic and precision. War is mathematics, Threx. It is resource management and tactical superiority. The side with more advantages wins. This is not a variable. It is a law. Threx bowed his head in acknowledgement. As you say, Commander. I will relay the order to the fleet. We jump to the human system within the hour. As Threx left the chamber, Kelvus returned his attention to the rotating planet in the hologram. He thought about the billions of humans living on that world, unaware that their civilization was about to change forever. In a way, he envied them. They had never known the touch of a greater power. They believed themselves to be significant, perhaps even special. Soon they would learn the truth that every other species had learned before them. The galaxy belonged to the strong, and the Arvelian Dominion was the strongest of all. Kelvus had conquered 12 worlds personally. He had accepted the surrender of generals and leaders who had wept before him, begging for mercy for their people. He had seen species fight with courage and determination, watched them employ clever tactics and desperate strategies. In the end, it never mattered. Logic always prevailed. Mathematics always won. He shut down the hologram and walked to the viewing port. Beyond the reinforced glass, he could see the assembled fleet, hundreds of ships hanging in the darkness like silver predators. Each vessel represented decades of engineering excellence, crewed by trained warriors who followed orders with perfect discipline. The humans had nothing to compare to this. Their largest warship would be classified as a medium frigate in the Dominion fleet. The jump to human space would take only moments. The war would take only days. And then Kelvus would add another victory to his record, another species to the long list of those who had learned that resistance was futile. He had studied war for 2 centuries. He understood its rhythms, its patterns, its inevitable conclusions. War was his profession, his art, his entire existence. What Kelvus did not know, could not know, was that he was about to receive an education that would shatter everything he believed. The Arvelian fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of the solar system, their arrival causing ripples in the fabric of space that would be detected by even the most primitive sensors. Kelvus watched the tactical display as his ships formed into their standard approach formation, a configuration that had proven successful in 47 previous campaigns. The pattern was designed to demonstrate overwhelming force while maintaining efficient firing solutions. It was textbook, perfect, and utterly intimidating. Within minutes, the human detection systems had spotted them. Kelvus waited for the panic, the frantic communications between human vessels, the desperate scrambling of their pathetic fleet. Instead, there was only silence. The human ships maintained their positions. Their communications channels remained calm, almost routine. Threx monitored the translation systems as they locked onto human broadcasts. Commander, we are receiving a transmission on multiple frequencies. They are broadcasting in what appears to be their most common language. Play it, Kelvus ordered. A human voice filled the command chamber, male and surprisingly steady. Unidentified vessels, this is Admiral Helen Brooks of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human territory without authorization. State your intentions immediately or you will be classified as hostile. Kelvus felt a flutter of annoyance. Sovereign territory. As if these primitives had any right to claim the space around their tiny world. He composed the standard response, the one that had been refined over centuries of Dominion expansion. Attention, human authority. This is Commander Kelvus of the Arvelian Dominion 3rd Subjugation Fleet. Your system and all its resources are hereby claimed in the name of the Dominion. You have 1 planetary rotation to stand down all military forces and prepare to receive our terms. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. This is your only warning. He expected pleading or threats or perhaps stunned silence. What he got was laughter. Brief but unmistakable. Then the human admiral spoke again. Commander Kelvus, this is Admiral Brooks. Here's our counteroffer. You have 1 hour to leave this system peacefully. After that, we will consider you hostile invaders and respond accordingly. We strongly suggest you take this opportunity. This is your only warning. Threx's scales rippled with surprise. Commander, they cannot be serious. Our fleet mass alone is 3 times their entire defensive force. Kelva studied the tactical display. The human ships had not moved, had not even powered up their weapon systems to full capacity. They were either supremely confident or completely insane. He decided on the latter. They are attempting to bluff, Kelva said. It is a primitive negotiating tactic. We will proceed as planned. Order the fleet to advance. When we reach their outer defensive perimeter, we will destroy one of their satellites. A demonstration will clarify the situation for them. The fleet moved forward, a wall of silver death cutting through the darkness of space. They passed the orbit of the system's outermost planets, then the next, and still the humans did nothing. Kelvas began to wonder if perhaps they had decided to surrender after all, and were simply too proud to announce it. Then everything changed. A small human vessel appeared on the sensors, moving fast from behind one of the system's gas giants. The ship was tiny, barely larger than a Dominion shuttle. Tactical analysis classified it as a patrol craft, armed with primitive kinetic weapons and a handful of missiles. Kelvas almost ignored it. Almost. Commander, the vessel is on an intercept course, Threx reported. It is broadcasting an identification signal. USS Liberty, commanded by Captain Jake Morrison. One ship, Kelvas said quietly. They send one ship to face our entire fleet. The arrogance is remarkable. Should we destroy it, Commander? Kelvas considered. This was an opportunity to demonstrate Dominion power without causing massive casualties. One ship destroyed cleanly would send the message clearly. Target the vessel. Fire when in optimal range, one shot. Make it clean. The Liberty did not slow down. As the Dominion weapons locked onto it, the small ship began to move in ways that should not have been possible for a vessel of its size. It rolled, spun, and dove through 3-dimensional space like a creature born in the void. The first shot missed. So did the second. What is happening? Kelvas demanded. Threx was studying his console with intense focus. Commander, the ship is using the orbital debris field as cover. They are navigating through a region of space that our sensors classify as too hazardous for ship traffic. The pilot is operating on pure instinct. It should not be possible. The Liberty weaved between chunks of ice and rock, pieces of old satellites and discarded equipment. Every time a Dominion ship achieved a weapons lock, the human vessel would slip behind another piece of debris. And all the while it kept coming closer. Then the Liberty opened fire. Its weapons were laughably primitive, magnetic accelerators that threw pieces of metal at high velocity. Against Dominion shields, they should have been useless. But the humans were not firing at the ships. They were firing at the debris field, shattering larger pieces into clouds of smaller fragments that scattered in all directions. One of Kelvis's destroyers took damage to its sensor array. Another reported shield fluctuations. They were not serious injuries, but they were injuries. From one small patrol craft. Destroy that vessel immediately, Kelvas ordered, his voice tight with anger. All ships in range, fire at will. The space around the Liberty lit up with weapons fire. The Dominion fleet threw enough firepower at the small ship to level a city. And impossibly, the Liberty survived. It dove through the storm of energy and projectiles, its pilot performing maneuvers that violated every principle of safe navigation. Then it ran out of ammunition. Kelvas watched as the Liberty stopped dodging and changed course, heading directly toward one of his destroyers. He understood what was about to happen a moment before it did. No, he whispered. They would not, but they did. The Liberty accelerated to its maximum speed. Just before impact, escape pods ejected from the vessel, carrying the crew to safety. Then the ship, still moving at tremendous velocity, struck the destroyer's flank like a hammer. The damage was not catastrophic, but it was significant. The destroyer listed to one side, its engines damaged, its hull breached in 3 places. And the Liberty was gone, converted into expanding cloud of debris and a point proven. Threx stared at the tactical display. Commander, why would they sacrifice a vessel for such minimal tactical gain? The crew survived, but the ship is destroyed. The exchange makes no mathematical sense. Kelvas did not answer immediately. He was trying to process what he had just witnessed. No Dominion captain would ever willingly destroy their own ship for such a small victory. The waste of resources, the loss of equipment, the irrationality of it all. But as he watched the damaged destroyer struggle to maintain formation, he realized something. The humans were not trying to win this engagement. They were sending a message, and the message was clear. We will not surrender. We will not run. We will make you pay for every meter of space you take. More human vessels appeared on the sensors. These were larger, proper warships, though still inferior to Dominion technology. They did not form neat battle lines. They did not follow any tactical doctrine Kelvis recognized. Instead, they scattered throughout the system, using planets and asteroids as cover, striking at supply ships and communication relays. Admiral Brooks transmitted again. Commander Kelvis, you have now seen what one human ship can do. We have 200 more. Leave now while you still can. Kelvis studied the tactical situation. His fleet still had overwhelming superiority. The damage they had taken was minimal. By every logical measure, he was winning. So why did he feel like something had gone terribly wrong? Commander? Threx asked quietly. Your orders? Kelvis straightened, forcing confidence into his voice. We proceed with the invasion. This changes nothing. They cannot stop us with such tactics. But even as he gave the order, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question he could not answer. If they are willing to do this now, what will they do when we reach their homeworld? 3 months had passed since the Arvelian fleet entered human space, and Kelvis had not slept properly in weeks. The invasion that was supposed to take 5 days had become a grinding, frustrating campaign that seemed to have no end. His fleet was still intact, still powerful, but every day brought new problems, new losses, new tactics from the humans that made no sense. The humans refused to fight fair. Kelvis had trained for centuries in proper military doctrine, learned the accepted rules of engagement that governed warfare between civilized species. The humans apparently had never read those rules, or perhaps they had read them and decided to ignore every single one. They did not mass their forces for decisive battles. Instead, they struck in small groups, hitting supply convoys and retreating before reinforcements could arrive. They attacked at night, during shift changes, at moments when Dominion crews were tired or distracted. They used the asteroid belt as a maze, hiding among the rocks and emerging only to launch quick strikes before vanishing again. Kelvis stood in his command chamber, reviewing the latest damage reports. Another supply ship had been destroyed, its cargo of weapons and ammunition now floating in space. The attack had been carried out by a single human shuttle, piloted by a team led by Commander Lisa Grant. They had used a captured Dominion transponder to get close, then boarded the supply ship and overloaded its reactor before escaping. Commander, we are detecting unusual communications traffic from Earth, Threx reported. The humans are broadcasting something on all channels. It appears to be some form of music. Music? Kelvis could not hide his confusion. During a war? Yes, Commander. Analysis suggests it is meant to boost morale among their forces. The lyrics speak of defiance and resistance. It is being played on every human vessel and installation. Kelvis listened to a sample of the transmission. The sound was strange to his ears, but he could understand the translated words. They sang of standing together, of never surrendering, of fighting until the end. It was propaganda, but it seemed to be working. Human forces showed no signs of breaking, no decline in their willingness to engage in combat. A priority alert flashed on his console. Another attack, this time on the Dominion's main communication relay. Kelvis brought up the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. A single human fighter had broken through the defensive perimeter and was heading straight for the relay station. All defensive batteries target that fighter, Kelvis ordered. Do not let it reach the relay. The fighter pilot's name was Ryan Carter. According to the identification transponder that was still somehow broadcasting, even as weapons fire filled the space around his ship. The fighter took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull breaching, but it kept coming. Kelvis watched in horror as the dying ship, trailing fire and debris, struck the communication relay. The explosion was massive. The relay station, which had taken weeks to position and calibrate, was destroyed instantly. And with it went the Dominion's ability to coordinate fleet movements across the system. They would have to rely on couriers now, slowing everything down. Did the pilot escape? Kelvis asked, though he already knew the answer. No, Commander. The fighter's escape pod was damaged. The pilot went down with his ship. Kelvis felt something he had never felt before while reviewing an enemy casualty report. Respect mixed with horror. The human had known he was going to die. He had chosen to die, chosen to trade his life for a tactical advantage. No Dominion pilot would ever make such a choice. Self-preservation was logical. Suicide was not. But the humans kept doing it. Again and again, they chose sacrifice over survival when it gave them even a small advantage. They fought as if death meant nothing, as if the mission was all that mattered. Worse still, they were learning. Kelvus had discovered that human teams were studying captured Dominion technology, taking apart weapons and ships to understand how they worked. What should have taken years was happening in weeks. Human vessels were starting to appear with modified shields, with weapons that had been upgraded using Dominion principles. A species that had been 2 centuries behind was closing the gap with terrifying speed. Threx approached with another report, this one physical, printed on actual paper. Kelvus took it and read through the contents. It was an intelligent summary about Earth itself, about what was happening on the human homeworld during the invasion. The planet had converted to total war production. Factories that once made civilian goods were now churning out weapons and ammunition. Schools were teaching advanced mathematics and engineering to children. Hospitals were training civilians in combat medicine. And most disturbing of all, there were lines. Long lines of humans waiting to volunteer for military service. How many? Kelvus asked, pointing to the recruitment numbers. Millions, Commander. They are volunteering faster than the military can train them, and these are not career soldiers. These are civilians. Teachers, engineers, artists. They are leaving their lives behind to fight us. Kelvus set down the report. In every previous campaign, civilian populations had been the weak point. Apply enough pressure, cause enough disruption to their daily lives, and they would pressure their leaders to surrender. But human civilians were not pressuring their leaders to end the war. They were joining it. A communication came through from one of the forward scout ships. They had intercepted a human broadcast, a news program from Earth. Kelvus ordered it played. A human woman appeared on the screen, sitting behind a desk. She spoke calmly, professionally, as if she were discussing weather rather than war. The Defense Force reported today that volunteers have exceeded all expectations. Training facilities are operating at triple capacity. In related news, Dr. Alan Foster announced that his team has successfully reverse-engineered the alien shield technology. The first human ships equipped with improved shields will be operational within the month. The broadcast continued with, more news, more reports of human progress and determination. There was no panic in the woman's voice, no fear, just facts delivered with confidence. Kelvus turned off the broadcast. Within the month, he repeated. They will have our shield technology within the month. It took us decades to develop those shields. The humans are more adaptable than we anticipated, Threx said carefully. Perhaps we should consider requesting reinforcements from the High Command. And admit failure? Kelvus felt anger rising. We have 300 ships against their 200. We have superior technology, superior training, superior everything. We should have won this war in days. But we have not won, Commander. And every day we remain here, the humans grow stronger. They learn from every engagement. They adapt to every tactic we employ, and they show no signs of surrendering. Kelvus knew Threx was right, but he could not accept it. To admit that humans, primitive humans, were outfighting the Dominion fleet was to admit that everything he had learned about war was wrong. It was to admit that mathematics and logic could be overcome by sheer stubborn refusal to lose. Another alert sounded. Another attack, this time on a fuel depot. The humans had somehow infiltrated the security systems and were causing chaos throughout the Dominion supply network. They were fighting dirty, using tactics that no honorable species would employ. And it was working. Kelvus looked at his reflection in the darkened viewing port. He saw a commander who had won 47 campaigns, who had never known defeat. But he also saw something else now, something that had not been there before. He saw doubt. He saw uncertainty. He saw a warrior who was beginning to understand that he did not understand war nearly as well as he thought he did. The humans were teaching him a lesson, one painful day at a time. They were teaching him that war was not just about technology and tactics. It was about will. It was about the refusal to accept defeat. It was about being willing to sacrifice everything for victory. And the humans, it seemed, were willing to sacrifice absolutely everything. 6 months into the war, Kelvus made a decision born of desperation. The campaign had become a stalemate, with his fleet unable to advance toward Earth and unable to secure the outer system. Casualties were mounting, not from massive battles but from 1,000 small cuts, each one drawing blood, each one weakening the Dominion position. He needed a victory, something decisive that would break human morale and prove that Arvelian superiority was real. Mars colony was the target. It was humanity's first settlement beyond their homeworld, a symbol of their expansion into space. The colony housed 50,000 civilians and only a small military garrison. Intelligence suggested it would be lightly defended, a vulnerable target that would hurt the humans psychologically while being militarily achievable. Kelvus assembled a strike force of 30 ships and gave the order to attack. As the fleet approached the Red Planet, he felt a glimmer of the old confidence. This would be the turning point. This would remind everyone, human and Arvelian alike, who held the true power in this system. The defense of Mars was commanded by Colonel Maria Santos, a human who had been a teacher before the war. Her garrison consisted of 300 trained soldiers and perhaps 1,000 armed civilians. Against 30 Dominion warships, it should have been no contest. The battle began with an orbital bombardment. Kelvus ordered his ships to target military installations, to break the colony's ability to resist. The first strikes hit their targets perfectly, destroying defensive batteries and communication arrays. But then something unexpected happened. The humans did not retreat to shelters. They did not attempt to evacuate. Instead, they moved toward the damaged areas and began fighting back with whatever they had. Kelvus watched through drone feeds as human defenders used mining equipment as weapons, as they turned industrial lasers into makeshift anti-ship guns. He saw civilians in pressure suits moving through areas open to the Martian atmosphere, repairing damage even as bombardment continued around them. The Dominion landed ground forces, expecting to secure the colony within hours. What they found was a maze. Every corridor became a battlefield. Every habitat dome was defended meter by meter. The humans had turned their own colony into a trap, using their knowledge of the terrain against invaders who had never seen the place before. A civilian engineer named Paul Henderson appeared in multiple combat reports. He was not a soldier, had never been trained for combat, but he was making life hell for Dominion forces. He had rigged pressure doors to malfunction, trapping Arvelian soldiers in compartments. He had rewired environmental systems to vent atmosphere suddenly, forcing attackers to retreat. And he had done something far worse. Threx brought Kelvus the report personally. "Commander, we have detected a problem with the colony's main fusion reactor. The humans are deliberately overloading it. If it goes critical, the explosion will destroy a significant portion of the colony and any ships in low orbit." "They would not," Kelvus said, but even as he spoke, he knew it was a lie. Of course they would. The humans had already proven they were willing to sacrifice anything. "We are detecting evacuation pods launching from the colony," Threx continued, "but most of the civilian population is not evacuating. They are moving to defensive positions. They are choosing to stay and fight." Kelvus made the decision to withdraw the ground forces before the reactor went critical. It was the logical choice, the only choice that made sense. But it meant admitting defeat, admitting that a small garrison and a group of civilians had held off a Dominion strike force. The evacuation was a disaster. Human forces attacked during the withdrawal, inflicting maximum casualties while the Dominion troops were vulnerable. One landing ship was destroyed completely. Others limped away with damaged drives and breached hulls. And all the while, the reactor countdown continued. Paul Henderson broadcast a final message before the reactor exploded. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as if he were explaining a simple repair job. "This is Henderson to any Dominion forces still in the area. You have 2 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. After that, this whole section of the colony becomes a very expensive firework. We stayed because Mars is our home and you are not welcome here. Safe travels." The reactor went critical exactly when Henderson said it would. The explosion tore through 3 habitat domes and vaporized everything within a kilometer radius. Kelvis later learned that Henderson had stayed at the reactor controls until the end, making sure the overload happened precisely when and where it would cause maximum damage to Dominion forces, while giving human civilians time to evacuate. Thousands of humans died in the defense of Mars colony, but the Dominion lost over 4,000 soldiers and 3 ships. By any mathematical calculation, it was a poor trade for the humans. Yet somehow it felt like a defeat for Kelvis. As his fleet retreated from Mars, nursing wounds and collecting the dead, Kelvis received another unexpected transmission. It was a video feed from inside a human medical ship that had been captured during a failed raid weeks earlier. The ship was still in Dominion hands, but it was being used as a mobile hospital now, treating wounded from both sides. The feed showed a human woman in medical clothing moving between beds. She was treating Arvelian soldiers, prisoners from various skirmishes, with the same care and attention she gave to human patients. Her name was Claire Adams, a nurse who had been aboard the medical ship when it was captured. Kelvis watched as she checked the vital signs of an Arvelian warrior who had been badly injured in a human ambush. The warrior was awake, watching her with suspicious eyes. Claire spoke to him in broken Arvelian, words she had clearly learned recently. "Pain?" she asked. "Need medicine?" The warrior nodded cautiously. Claire administered painkillers through the medical equipment, adjusting the dosage for Arvelian physiology. Then she did something that made Kelvis's blood run cold with confusion. She placed her hand gently on the warrior's shoulder, a gesture that even across species lines clearly meant comfort, meant compassion. "You will heal," she said simply. "You will be okay." The warrior stared at her, confusion evident even across the gulf of species difference. "Why?" he managed in trade standard language. "Why help enemy?" Claire smiled, a tired expression that showed the strain of working in a captured medical facility for weeks. "Because you are hurt," she said. "That is enough." Kelvis turned off the feed. He could not reconcile what he had seen with what he knew about war. The humans fought with savage determination, sacrificing themselves without hesitation, turning their own colonies into battlefields. Yet they also treated captured enemies with compassion, refused to torture or execute prisoners, maintained their moral codes even in the midst of total war. They were contradictions. They were impossible, and they were winning. Threx entered the command chamber with the final casualty reports from Mars. The numbers were worse than the initial estimates. The fleet had lost almost 30% of its effective combat strength in 6 months of fighting. Replacement ships would take cycles to arrive, and the High Command was already expressing displeasure with the lack of progress. "Commander," Threx said quietly, "the crew is afraid. They do not fear human weapons or human ships. They fear human determination. They say the humans do not know when to quit, that fighting them is like fighting a force of nature that cannot be reasoned with or stopped." Kelvis looked at his old friend and second in command. "What do you think, Threx? You who cautioned me from the beginning. What do you see when you look at humanity?" Threx was silent for a long moment before answering. "I see a species that should not be able to stand against us. But I also see a species that does not care what should be possible. They care only about what they will make possible through sheer refusal to accept defeat. And I think, Commander, that such a species may be undefeatable." Kelvis knew Threx was right. The war was lost, not in any single battle, not through any tactical failure, but through a simple fact that he had refused to accept until now. You cannot defeat an enemy who will never surrender, who sees every defeat as just another reason to fight harder, who views sacrifice not as a tragedy but as an honor. The humans had not won through superior tactics or better technology. They had won through something far more powerful and far more terrifying. They had won through the simple, absolute refusal to lose. 8 months after entering human space, the recall order finally came. The High Command had reviewed the campaign reports, the casualty lists, the resource expenditures. The conclusion was cold and efficient. The invasion of Earth was a strategic failure. The Third Subjugation Fleet was to withdraw immediately and return to Dominion space for reassignment. Kelvis read the order 3 times, searching for some clause that would allow him to continue, to salvage something from this disaster. There was none. The humans had done the impossible. They had fought the Arvelian Dominion to a standstill and forced a retreat. The withdrawal took 2 weeks to organize. Ships had to be repaired enough for the long journey home. Supplies had to be consolidated. Prisoners had to be transferred to human custody under terms negotiated by Admiral Helen Brooks herself. Kelvis had expected the Admiral to be triumphant, to gloat over the Dominion's defeat. Instead, she was professional and courteous. Commander Kelvis, her final transmission began. I want you to understand something. We did not want this war. We would have preferred peace, would have welcomed you as visitors and potential friends. But you came to conquer, and we could not allow that. We defended our home because it is ours, and no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to take it from us. She paused, and Kelvis saw something in her expression that he had not expected. Not hatred, not anger, but a kind of tired sadness. We are willing to discuss diplomatic relations when you are ready, Brooks continued. We are willing to trade, to share knowledge, to coexist peacefully. But we will never submit. We cannot. It is not in our nature. I hope you will take this message back to your leaders. Humanity is not interested in empire. We just want to be left alone to find our own path among the stars. The transmission ended. Kelvis sat in the silence of his command chamber for a long time afterward, thinking about her words. Not interested in empire, just wanted to be left alone. Yet when threatened, they had fought with a ferocity that had broken a fleet that had conquered 47 other species. During the long journey home, Kelvis found himself unable to focus on the usual duties of command. His mind kept returning to the battles, the sacrifices, the impossible determination of the humans. He reviewed combat footage, read interrogation, transcripts, studied everything he could find about human psychology and culture. The interrogation files were particularly enlightening. Human prisoners, when questioned, showed no fear of their captors. Some were defiant, others were cooperative. But all of them shared a common trait. They genuinely believed their cause was just believed that defending their home was worth any cost. One prisoner, a pilot named Danny Price, who had been captured after his ship was disabled, had said something that Kelvis could not forget. You want to know why we keep fighting? Price had said. It is simple. You came to our home and told us we had no choice but to serve you. Every human who has ever lived understands what that means, understands that some things are worth dying for. Freedom is one of those things. So yeah, we will keep fighting. We will fight until you leave, or until every last one of us is dead. Those are your options. Kelvis had reviewed thousands of interrogations in his career. He had heard prisoners beg, threaten, bargain, and lie. But he had never heard such absolute certainty, such complete absence of doubt. Price believed every word he said, and so did every other human prisoner. The fleet finally reached the borders of Dominion space after 3 months of travel. Kelvis had used the time to compile a comprehensive report on the campaign, but more importantly, on humanity itself. The High Command would expect a military analysis. They would get that, but they would also get something more. He titled the report Assessment Humanity, and began with a simple statement. This species must never be engaged in military conflict again. The report detailed everything. The human capacity for rapid adaptation, their willingness to sacrifice, their ability to maintain morale even in the face of certain defeat. But more than that, it tried to explain something that could not be easily quantified. The human spirit, the thing that made them keep fighting when logic said they should surrender. Humanity does not fight like other species, Kelvis wrote. Other species fight to win, fight to gain advantage, fight for logical, understandable reasons. Humans fight because they are humans. They do not see war as a calculation of resources and tactical positions. They see it as a test of will, a measure of their determination to remain free. And they have infinite determination. He described specific incidents. Jake Morrison and the Liberty, choosing destruction over retreat. Ryan Carter, flying a dying ship into a critical target. Paul Henderson, staying at the reactor controls to ensure the explosion happened exactly when it needed to. Claire Adams, treating enemy wounded with the same care as her own people. Each of these incidents defies military logic, the report continued. Yet together they represent something far more dangerous than any weapon or tactic. They represent a species that values ideals over survival, that sees death in service of those ideals as honorable rather than tragic. This is not a weakness. This is perhaps the most formidable advantage any species could possess. Kelvus recommended that humanity be granted immediate diplomatic recognition and that future contact be restricted to peaceful trade and cultural exchange. He also recommended that the Dominion never, under any circumstances, attempt to conquer or subjugate humanity again. They will not stop fighting, he wrote in his conclusion. Not ever. You can destroy their ships, their cities, even their entire planet, but you cannot break their will, and a species whose will cannot be broken cannot be conquered. The mathematics of war mean nothing when facing an enemy who does not accept the possibility of defeat. On his last night before reaching the Dominion homeworld, Kelvus stood in his quarters, holding a small piece of debris he had kept from the battlefield. It was a fragment of metal from a human fighter, scorched and twisted. On it was etched a name, Ryan Carter. It had been recovered from the wreckage of the communication relay, the place where Carter had sacrificed himself. Kelvus turned the metal over in his hands, studying it. Carter had been young, according to the records. He had family waiting for him on Earth. He had a future ahead of him. And he had thrown it all away for a tactical advantage that lasted only days before the Dominion restored communications through other means. In purely military terms, Carter's sacrifice had been wasteful, inefficient, and ultimately pointless. But Kelvus understood now that the sacrifice was never about military efficiency. It was about proving a point. It was about showing that humanity would pay any price, make any sacrifice to defend their freedom. Threx found him there, staring at the piece of debris. "Commander, we are approaching home. The High Command has requested your presence immediately upon arrival." "They will want to know why we failed," Kelvus said quietly. "And what will you tell them?" Kelvus set down the piece of debris carefully, treating it with the respect it deserved. "I will tell them the truth. I thought I understood war. I understood tactics, strategy, logistics, mathematics. I had studied warfare for 2 centuries. I had conquered 12 worlds. I believed I knew everything there was to know about military conflict." He turned to face Threx. "The humans taught me I was wrong. War is not just about tactics and technology. It is about will. It is about the refusal to accept defeat. It is about fighting not because you can win, but because the alternative is unacceptable. And humanity possesses that quality to a degree I have never seen in any species. So they are dangerous," Threx said. "No," Kelvus corrected. "They are only dangerous if you threaten them. They do not want war. They do not want to conquer. They just want to be left alone. But if you do threaten them, if you try to take their freedom, then yes, they become the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The ship docked at the Dominion homeworld the next morning. Kelvus gathered his reports, including the fragment from Carter's fighter, and prepared to face the High Command. He did not know if they would accept his recommendations. He did not know if they would understand what he had learned. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had thought he understood war when he entered human space. He had been arrogant, confident in his superiority and his knowledge. The humans had stripped away that arrogance, had taught him through blood and sacrifice that war was something far more complex and terrible than he had imagined. They had taught him that the most important factor in any conflict was not the weapons you carried or the tactics you employed. It was the reason you fought, and humanity fought for something that made them unstoppable, the simple, absolute right to be free. Kelvus had studied war for 2 centuries, but it took 8 months facing humanity to finally understand what war truly meant.